So let's talk about some practical ways that you can protect your core and your pelvic floor when caring for your children. And this can be for all ages. So of course, when you have a younger, smaller child, there are going to be some things that differ, but the foundational skills and the concepts pretty much stay the same as you progress, as your kiddos get older. You may just not be doing some of the same things that you would be doing with your newborn, with your smaller baby on the floor compared to when they get older. But all of these tips are going to help you to protect your core and your pelvic floor as your kid progresses and gets older, and as you, mama, progress in your postpartum healing and recovery. One of the very first things I like for my moms and my clients to think about is, how are you breathing? What is your positioning like as you are going about your daily life and caring for your kiddos? Are you constantly shoulder shrugged over? Are you constantly arched back and having this like low sway in your back? Are you constantly sitting in the hip when you're holding your kids and like, oh? What is your posture? What is your positioning like? This is something that when you start bringing awareness to your positioning and your posture, it really changes the way that you do everything. So back to posture and positioning. Some of the postures that I see a lot with moms that aren't necessarily great is butt tucking and clenching while holding your baby. You could have your baby here and you're like rocking and clenching your glutes. Instead of doing this, because it just presses your abdominals out and it just tucks your butt under and it's not great for your back, probably wondering why your back hurts all the time. Instead, I want you to think about coming forward. Your baby is not going to fall. Holding your baby, breathing, using your abdominals to zipper up your abdominals and your pelvic floor. Relax your glutes. So none of this, instead release. None of this. Release, relax, bringing a soft bend in your knees, and then you can rock your baby using your breath. This is going to help protect your core and your pelvic floor, so that way you're not getting so much tension and tightness on the back of the pelvic floor, which then can create pelvic floor related dysfunction, leaking, retention in the bladder, pain with intercourse, a whole heap of things. Another posture and position that I see a lot is hunching forward. Hunching forward, we're hunched while we're nursing, we're here, and not a lot of movement. We're getting this tension in the front of the chest. We're getting tension down, pressing down into the pelvic floor. We probably have somewhat of a pelvic tuck here. And again, not really great positioning. Lots of strain on the upper back. My back is aching, just over exaggerating this. But seriously, this is how some moms are going through and doing their daily activities. And this is not going to be the most optimal for your pelvic floor and your core function. So instead, I want you to think about bringing the shoulders back and down. Some people don't like that cue, but I think it helps you to think about bringing the shoulders back and down to relax, and then using your core to zipper up and allow your core to be your support, and really thinking about most of the movement coming from your back rather than your shoulders and your biceps and your triceps. And I know this baby is super light. My babies are not light. They weren't light. They were really heavy. And so I remember having to practice this myself and to make sure to remind myself, okay, relax my shoulders. You don't have to always be here. And as soon as you think about relaxing, it changes things. So another way that you can protect your core and your pelvic floor during and while doing your daily activities and caring for your kiddos is by squatting or lunging, having better movement patterns and breathing during those movement patterns to get your kiddo up off the floor, to get your kiddo in and out of the bed, to get them from place to place, from the bouncer to the mat. We want to make sure we have good movement patterns, and one of those ways to do that is to go into a good squat and to learn how to squat appropriately. When squatting, if you have your kiddo and they're on the floor or they want mommy, mama, please pick me up, you know, they're reaching for you, you come down into your squat and then you exhale to lift them up rather than, to reach over. That's ultimately going to put so much pressure and strain on your back, on your core, on your pelvic floor, creating lots of pressure, bulging, and ultimately could be a factor in if you do or don't heal your pelvic floor and your core after having your babies. So instead of this and this and this, I want you to think about a squat. It can be a narrow squat. It can be a lunge. It can be a twist. Making everything that you do essentially a core workout or a workout changes the way that you start doing things when you're caring for your kiddos and ultimately helps you to connect to your core and your pelvic floor. Another big one that I see is moms holding their babies on the hip and dipping into their hip all the time. Now, while I realize, and I have 2 small kiddos too, and that used to love to be on the hip, one still does, and it's easy to get into this position. What I will encourage you to do is, number 1, if you find yourself in this position a lot, definitely get a hip seat, especially for being out in public. You can wrap the hip seat around you, put baby on top or your toddler, and you have more mobility, more function, more strength to kind of move around without having to be in your hip and putting all that pressure into your hip and your pelvic floor. But in your day-to-day, you're not going to be wearing a hip seat. So in these other moments, I encourage moms to connect to their core, use your core as your base of support, shift from here to here, use your breath, and you can simply walk forward, you can walk side, you still have mobility, you still have function here moving around, but we're not just holding here. If anything, sometimes when you come back to center, you may just need to bring baby over to the front. I know I did this a lot with my second baby, and anytime I found myself in a hip seat, I would just bring baby around to the front, and then you're going to be less likely to sit in this position. Because ultimately, this hip dipping position, again, we're getting tension, tightness over on one side of the pelvic floor. We're not allowing our body to relax and to have good posture and positioning. And your pelvic floor and your core function and strength is going to rely heavily on that foundation that you create of breathing, good body mechanics, and the way that you do things in your day-to-day. Because ultimately, caring for your kiddos is like 90%, if not more, of your life. And you can do all the exercises in the world for an hour a day for the rest of your life, but if the rest of your day you have poor posture, poor positioning, poor body mechanics, then you're gonna compromise your healing, your strength, and your function. So my encouragement to you is to make sure that you connect with your body and learn how to connect with your core and your pelvic floor. For more tips to learn how to activate your deep core, to learn how to connect to your pelvic floor, make sure you check out the Core Guide and the Postpartum Movement Academy programs that can truly be life-changing for you when it comes to healing your core and your pelvic floor.